And what I had prepared myself for based on the incredible but sometimes unfortunate experiences of other women throughout history, some who are no longer with us, many who I interviewed, was that a lot of them, their wins weren't for their personal gain. Their wins were only felt by society and by women generations afterwards. And so I was preparing for a fact or a scenario in which I would lose a lot, maybe even parts of the court case, but the net benefit would be a win.
This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Camaragal. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Welcome to First Read. Hello and welcome to First Read, the meeting ground for big ideas. I'm your host, Charle Malycon, and today we're joined by Antoinette Lattouf, award-winning journalist, human rights activist, and 2 times book author. Welcome, Antoinette.
I am so happy to be here.
It's great to have you in the house. Antoinette Lattouf is a veteran of Australian media in both commercial and public broadcasters, including the ABC, SBS, Channel 10 and in podcasting. A warrior for social justice, in 2017 she co-founded Media Diversity Australia and in 2022 published her first book, How to Lose Friends and Influence White People. Last year, with longtime friend and colleague Jan Fran, she founded Media and their hugely popular podcast, We Used to Be Journos. She also successfully sued the ABC for wrongful dismissal, which she shares in her latest book, Women Who Win. That is an incredible resume, Antoinette, and they are just the highlights. You are clearly someone who is not afraid to stand up and speak up for what you believe in.
Yeah, that's probably right. Somebody said, are you going to write another book? And I'm like, yes, Women Who Sleep, because I am tired. But the times are pretty urgent, and I don't know how to be anything other than myself, and that is, irrespective of what is thrown at you, try and do the right thing, even if it is the hard thing.
Yes, and you are certainly an incredible example of that for all of us. I mean, you wrote your first book in 22, How to Lose Friends and Influence White People, and you were very clear in that there is a cost and a consequence to speaking up against racism.
Yeah, it really was the prequel to everything that came.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
But, did you expect, I guess, the level of consequence that you subsequently faced?
Yeah, this is really interesting because somebody actually on X or Blue Sky, I spend way too much time online, I can't even pinpoint where it was. They said if ABC management had just read Antoinette's first book, then they would have known not to have done what they did. And they also would have known that she was not the sort of person that was going to take it lying down. Mm-hmm. And she also, in many ways, I'm speaking about myself in the third person, preempted what was going to happen. Having said that, despite the fact that I had co-founded a not-for-profit in the diversity, equity and inclusion space, I'd done academic research in this area, I'd written a book about achieving, doing anti-racism work and the different cost for, particularly in an Australian context, for those who try and speak about injustice, inequity in Australia, it still didn't entirely prepare me for what would come and the way I was treated and the cost. It did give me some tools, but it certainly didn't prepare me for the scale and I guess the sense of betrayal that came with the journey, the unfortunate legal journey with the ABC.
Yeah, and I guess the misrepresentation, that personal affront to who you are and the sense of how do you not understand me? It's not as if I haven't, put myself out there and tried to be fair and tried to be clear.
Yes. There weren't really any surprises.
No, just
at my end,
betrayal.
in terms of who I am, the values I have in public interest journalism, the concern I have for human rights, the anti-racism work I do, the commitment to speaking truth to power, giving a voice to the voiceless. I have a long history in all the various work I've done across commercial television or in public broadcasting or in the not-for-profit space. There's a continuity in terms of the things that matter to me and the things that I stand for. I didn't all of a sudden just come out of the blue and be like, oh, I'm really into recycling or something. Not that there's anything wrong with people who are into recycling, but there were no surprises.
No.
And so I think that's probably what surprised audiences and the Australian public. They were like, well, why have they done this?
The surprise was that it shouldn't have been a surprise.
Yeah, why are they? Why is this happening?
Why are you reacting?
Yeah, why is this happening?
So you wrote your first book, and then you wrote this second book obviously through very different circumstances.
Mm.
How was that? How was the difference between book number 1 and writing book number 2?
It's so interesting. In sometimes I was wondering if the things I was writing about in book number 1 I believed in anymore. There's so much in the world that had changed between 2022 and 2025. On the one hand, the rise of Trumpian style or the return of Trumpian style politics and a very overt attack on diversity and inclusion, gender rights, a rolling back of gender rights, this culture war against what it means to be woke, and then corporations across the globe, including Australia, rolling back their efforts in anti-racism, in just gender equality and general inclusivity. The first things that were on the chopping block were all of those committees and all of those policies, and in some days, some of the days that were held at certain organisations. So I began to go, God, like, I committed a not-for-profit. I started this. I believed that if you had a seat at the table, these institutions could be changed from the inside. But again, the world changed so significantly, both with the rise of Trump and we're seeing a rise of the far right, both Australia and abroad. But also, we've never before seen a live-streamed genocide on our phones and complete impunity to an ally of Australia. So, and a media class and a political class that weren't operating to the values that we thought they operated in a democratic country that abides by the rule of law and cares about international law. So all of the things that I thought we were working towards or were able to achieve started to get turned on their heads. So I guess the difference between book 1 and book 2, I started to go, I don't know if change is possible within organisations anymore. I don't know if organisations have the appetite to want to change. So a lot happened between 1 and 2. I had a bit of an existential crisis, to be honest. I was like, I don't think in this point in time, an organisation, as important as I think an organisation like the ABC is, I don't think in this moment it is possible, it is capable of change on the inside. And that is different to the Antoinette who wrote that book. That first book.
Gosh, that's a journey. That's a lot to absorb, actually.
Yes, and I haven't really arrived at a final point. I'm questioning. And you know, maybe it'll evolve. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong.
So the shorthand title for your first book is How to Lose. And now you've come out with this book, How to Win. I mean, you've just told us different Antoinettes.
Yeah, I guess
it's a real contrast. Like, was that kind of intentional delivery?
No,
isn't that amazing?
I didn't even.
So there's this subconscious thing that's working away too within you as a writer, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess obviously my first title was tongue-in-cheek, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which was very, very successful. But I wanted to be honest about the cost of pushing power. Power is never ceded willingly. Things don't shift obligingly. And I wanted to acknowledge that whether you're an ally or an advocate, there's a cost and you can lose friends.
Yeah, fair warning.
Yes, but then I turned it into winning, because I think more and more people need a pathway out of what feels like a very mad and dystopian time.
This title you were working under, I guess you were penning notes to self. I mean, you're a journalist, so obviously I would imagine that regardless of what happens, you're going to be writing things. The book that's come out, Women Who Win, it is partly a book about your court case, and it's also a book about these amazing stories of incredible women in Australian history, women who win. Did you always think it was going to become a book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. I started writing this book between the Fair Work Commission and the Federal Court. So the Fair Work Commission was the first legal hurdle, and I won that, and then had to go to federal court. And in between, I really struggled. I struggled to know what my identity was. I struggled to economically, because pretty much all work had dried up. I struggled to know if I would come out the other side as a whole person, how broken I would be. And so I pitched the idea for this book with this title in between that process, because the way I sought solace or I found courage was to learn about other women who had done what would have seemed to be impossible, insurmountable, a little bit mad, and how they were treated and how they persevered. And so it was really a product of me trying to manage my increasing anxiety and panic attacks. And in the dead of the night at 3 a.m. when I was by myself and spiraling, I started to research and in some cases reach out to these women So I always knew it would be a book. I knew I had to document my story, and my story was unfolding in real time. But I also knew that I wanted this title, irrespective of whether I won or not.
I was going to ask you that,
Yeah.
because obviously you did come up, then you're writing this book, you've come up with this title,
Yeah.
but you don't know yet if you're going to win your actual court case. So did you have a backup title?
I didn't.
No,
I didn't.
So
I didn't have a backup title, because the more I wrote and the more my process played out, the more I realised how fraught the notion of winning is, particularly for a woman. And I wanted to examine who decides what a win is. Sometimes wins are objective and clear, but at what cost? When does a woman get to revel in her wins or feel the benefits and impacts of her win? And what I had prepared myself for, based on the incredible but sometimes unfortunate experiences of other women throughout history, some who are no longer with us, many who I interviewed, was that a lot of them, their wins weren't for their personal gain. Their wins were only felt by society and by women generations afterwards. And so I was preparing for a fact or a scenario in which I would lose a lot, maybe even parts of the court case, but the net benefit would be a win. And so I don't know if that just sounds like I'm tying myself into knots to justify, but no, it really just to justify this title, but it just became obvious to me that women aren't necessarily allowed to revel in their wins, or wins can be wound back, which we've seen in some of the stories. It requires, I guess, eternal vigilance, and also an ongoing examination of who determines what a win is. And there's a point that I write about in the book when I had decided I'm a winner. I was like, I have won, because I've done, and I don't want to, you can grab the book if you want to understand what point, but it became so clear to me that I had won.
And this was before the ruling. Ah, interesting.
That I had won.
So what was it? What was that epiphany? Like, what made you think I have won? Is it that sense of purpose? The sense of purpose,
the not backing down despite how much was thrown at me, and a lot was thrown at me, be that character assassinations in tabloid media, lots of threats and intimidation, I guess what you call lawfare, a protracted legal battle that's designed to exhaust you. There was just so many options for me to opt out, and my refusal to shrink, my refusal to stop speaking, my refusal to do what so many women I know have had to do in generations past, not even generations past, in other more contemporary contexts, either exiled from public life, leave the country, your reputation's in ruins, just have to cop the character assassination in tabloid. At none of those junctures did I go back down. I was like, that is not going to be my narrative. That will not be my journey. This will not be how this story plays out.
Yeah.
Sadly, the more I researched and the more I looked at women and then looked at their victories and then looked at the way they were represented in the media at the time, and it could be anything from convict women who were imprisoned for swearing.
How very dare they?
And how they were talked about.
Yeah.
Or right up until women in the 70s, 80s and 90s, and how they were spoken about, and then how belatedly they're revered and have a statue or a ferry or whatever named after them. And I was like, well, no, I'm going to determine my story on my terms and in real time.
Yeah.
I don't want a ferry named after me in 30 years' time.
But you did have a verb.
I do have a verb. And I would like a ferry now. So that is...
Let me see what I can arrange. Yes, for those who don't know, Antoinette's name did become a verb during this time, Lattouf.
Yes. Yeah, it's in the Urban Dictionary.
That's it. It stands for, I guess, in summary, people of colour who basically get annihilated for speaking up. And as you mentioned, you actually even spoke about this in your first book. You mentioned quite a few Australians who've had this done to them.
Yeah, Adam Goods, Yasmin Abdul Majid. She had getting Yasmined.
Yeah.
She was actually driven out of the country.
That's it, exiled or silenced. But you weren't.
Well, I knew what the path should be.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I get what they're trying to do. It's intimidation, it's character assassination, it's social isolation. They got to a point where people, if I was at social events, would step out of photographs with me because they didn't want to be. I'm like, I am not a sex pest. You do realise I shared a Human Rights Watch post.
Yeah.
You do realise I shared a fact. I have not murdered anybody, and I haven't assaulted anybody, and I haven't done anything a lot of horrible people in the media can do and have done and get promoted.
And continue to do.
And continue to do. And so I had, unfortunately, some insight into the experiences of others, but that insight enabled me to I guess, orchestrate my response.
And is that where you get your courage from, is kind of these stories, or is it people around you? What does give you the courage to continue? Because it's much easier to at some point back down and go, actually, no, thank you.
Yes.
You know, I've done enough. It's not about you. Of course, you're standing up for a much bigger purpose and reason, but also it is affecting not just you, but your friends, your family.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's a combination of things. I think I definitely drew courage from, and I call the women in this book a bit of an IV drip of courage. The more unsure I was, the more down I was, the more my mental health spiraled, the more I felt I was in this impossible David versus Goliath battle. It was their stories and their convictions and their journeys that certainly refueled me. I have a very supportive husband and family. But something my sister said to me on the way here, she's like, where are you off to now? What are you doing? She's like, oh, sis, you have always been like this.
Oh, wow.
You have always been like this. You were the girl on the playground, and if somebody was bullying somebody, she's like, I remember you were in year 7 and you had your hand on your hip and there were some people in year 11 bullying this boy, and you just stood in front of a big group of boys and you told them to back off.
Oh, I love that.
And she's like, and they would have just flattened you because you're a skinny little thing. And she's like, and I just remember thinking, my sister's going to get her head punched in.
And she ran away.
Yes. And she's like, you've just always been like this.
Yeah.
When you see something that feels wrong, you can't resist your impulse but to stand there and put your hand on your hip.
Yeah.
So I think it's partly innate.
Yeah, definitely. I remember you writing that in your first book, that your mother, even when she was pregnant with you, was like, oh, we've got a fighter here.
Yes. Mum talks about when she was pregnant with me, and I was the 5th of 7 children in 10 years. So she would have been incredibly tired and had a lot on. She's like, I just had this sense of energy. I couldn't sit down. I was always up and doing stuff. I was cleaning. I was out and about all the time.
That was your fault.
In a way that it was different in her other pregnancy. She's like, you were just born running.
Yeah.
So
haven't stopped yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not gonna.
Not yet. Not till I write my book, Women Who Sleep, and then I'll
and then you'll have to go through that lived experience and hallelujah. Is there there are so many women in the book. There, as you say, there are politicians, there are steel workers, there are social reformers. Like, is there a particular story, a particular moment that kind of got you through that you want to share with us? There are so amazing ones.
But... Yeah, what I wanted to... I'll answer that because there is some woman who comes to mind. It's interesting, whenever I ask this question, and depending where I am, how I'm feeling, I'm drawn to a different woman.
Yes.
But what I wanted to do and make sure in this book was that I challenged myself in the sorts of women I amplified and learned from. And so I veered into territory that I'm unfamiliar with. And some of my favourite chapters were actually the hardest to write, like my chapter on women in science and women in STEM, because I have no experience there, no real interest in science and STEM. It's not my world. It's not my hobby. It's not what my friends talk about. And so I learned some of the most valuable lessons from them, and also from the story I did on women in sport.
Yeah.
Again, because I say my only foray into sport was being on a debating team. That's the only team I've ever played. And I really enjoyed it. But it's just not my world. And so I guess I wanted to not only challenge myself, but to provide a real cross-section and a real diverse group of women, diverse in identity, diverse in age, diverse in background, and just because there are so many different things we can learn from lots of different women. But a woman that really stood out to me, particularly because my win was, I guess, significant for employment law. It will have hopefully ramifications for the independence of our public broadcaster, but it also comes at a time where it feels like you're up against it. It feels like there are so many things that are going in the wrong direction. And Dr. Alana Gall is a First Nations woman who has dedicated her career to trying to protect First Nations medicine, bush medicine, and to protect it from patents, protect it from pharmaceuticals, protect the knowledge among certain communities. And I guess what I learned from her is that she's been doing so much incredible work, and she was part of what became an international treaty, or the first step to an international treaty to protect First Nations knowledge and First Nations medicine. But her understanding of how small but also significant that step was, and people's perseverance, despite knowing that you have incredible powers that are
working against money,
you.
Deep
there is
pockets,
so much money. The pharmaceutical
invested interests,
invested
right?
interest
Pharma,
in taking knowledge, in taking
using
plants,
the law.
using the law to strip First Nations people of access to their own medicine, to their own knowledge, and then it's essentially like either pricing them out or not even being able to have access to certain plants because it's part of a patent or an agreement with a research group which is linked to a pharmaceutical company. So these First Nations people, at a time when the health disparities between First Nations and the rest of Australians is widening. She's doing this work at a national and international scale. And so for me, her win symbolised that, you know, your work is not one and done. Your win isn't, it's a process, a continual process that will probably outlive her. And for me, at a time when there are these sort of intergenerational injustices in human rights, what feels like a winding back of so many things we thought our democracy stood for. I just think, God, I don't feel I can achieve everything in my lifetime that I want. It feels, some days it feels impossible. And so for her story, for me, just reminded me that no, this is how we do what we can and we leave the tools and the knowledge for the next generation to further those wins.
Yeah, that's amazing. We do what we can with who we are, with where we're at.
Exactly.
Whatever that looks like.
Exactly.
You know? And I think that's really important to take away, actually, because I think a lot of people would look at you and think, I couldn't do what Antoinette does. It would really...
I get told that almost every day.
Right? But they don't have to, do they? They don't have to. They just have to do what they can within their group, within their circle, within who they are as a person, their character. If there's someone who says, maybe I'm just going to read to my child at night some stories that will help them understand the world better and help them make the world a better place. You know, that makes a difference. It actually makes a difference.
Exactly. So, and I have a lot of, as I said, I get told that almost every day. And some people within my immediate orbit, like Jan Fran, who I started at Media with, she's like, I know I wouldn't do. I couldn't and wouldn't do. She was such a huge support person for me. And that's the other thing, you amplify. And that takes me back to my first book, which is, we all have a role to play, whether we are the ally, whether we are the support person, whether we amplify, whether we're at the front line. Everybody has a role to play. And so this book, in certain part, also poses that to the reader. What is it that you're going to do? What is your win? You don't have to be Paralympian Ellie Cole on, winning, collecting the most medals in Australian history for a Paralympian. But it doesn't mean that we don't have power to win.
Well, Ellie Cole is actually a really interesting one, right? So she is Australia's most awarded female Paralympian. She won 17 medals. She's got an Order of Australia. And yet by the time you're interviewing her, she sort of looks back and says, it wasn't worth the cost. And in fact, my life is better now that I'm not so-called winning than it was then. That's a really interesting take on women who win and this concept of winning you were talking about earlier. Why was it important to include her story in the book?
I guess because she's, as our friendship has developed, like we met at a corporate conference quite a few years ago and we stayed in touch, and I saw sort of her evolve from retiring from professional swimming to having, I guess, a bit of a reckoning of what it all means to her, so much so that she's packed her medals away. She can't even look at them.
Gosh.
And part of that was because she realised, A, the cost to her body and her relationships was so high, but also the entire time she was winning, as someone with a disability, with a prosthetic leg due to a cancer when she was young, she was actually trying to get the acceptance or to win something that she was never able to win with the body that she had, a certain validation or a comparison to Olympians. And she says there was one instance where she realised when the cameras turned up after the Paralympians had swum and the cameras and the broadcasters only came when it was the Olympians. And in her time, Paralympics weren't broadcast on, I think, one of the commercial networks.
Mm.
And so I think she realised she was trying to win something that was never really going to make her feel whole.
Yes.
In a system that was, and so now she does a lot of work for people with disability, also talking about is sort of inclusion, pay equity. She was also working full time. She would, because there wasn't the room.
They're not paid.
They're not paid.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I won. I had to win, and what I had to do to win came at such a high cost that it wasn't worth it. And so she's much more interested in addressing that inequity.
Yeah.
So that people don't have to pack their medals away.
Yeah.
And feel that they've given up too much to
and
try
seeking maybe validation in the wrong places from the wrong people.
Yes.
You know, again, working in that point in time. Now that she's come full circle, hopefully she's feeling
far more whole, and notes the differences and the changes and the advancements for other Paralympians.
Yes, yeah.
And that's one of the things that is so generous about so many of the women. All of them understand, and most, I would say, accept that their path was hard, it was unfair, at times it was brutal, but all but one would do it again.
Yeah.
Because the net benefit for others was worth it, which is incredibly generous.
Showing people, you know, you can't be what you can't see. So
exactly.
In that regard, but it does come at a high personal cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to include her again because she's an objective winner. She's probably the clearest winner of...
On paper.
Yeah, on paper.
By far the clearest
She's
winner.
a very clear winner, and that's why I really wanted to include her.
Yeah. As you said earlier, you know, it's a different interpretation. What does this word winning actually mean?
Yeah.
And if we can own that for ourselves and define that for ourselves.
Exactly. I think that's far more powerful. She has now.
You know, that sense of I was winning for other people. Now that I'm winning for me.
Yes.
That is what truly counts as a win.
Yes.
And then I can help other people who may have aspirations to get medals, and that's a win. I'm going to help them do that too. So on all counts. There's this great chapter in the book, I love it, which is basically written in hip-hop verse.
You know, that was a bit divisive. Some people don't like that I turned court transcripts into music tracks.
I mean, look, it is a bold stylistic choice. I will grant you that. Personally, I love that sort of thing, experimental writing. And, you know, it actually follows this really long history of activist writers. Claudia Rankine in Australia, we've got Evelyn Araluen, Omar Musa, you know, among many, many others. Like, what is the thinking behind that sort of stylistic break?
Yes. To be honest, in that particular chapter, when I get to the point that I have won, and I talk about some things that happened on the stand, and for the first time, I revisit the court transcripts. Like, living through it was one thing, but having to go reread the court transcripts, it was really friggin' hard. There was so much where I was, I was just sitting there crying at the, and I thought, how can I translate this in a way that will engage and inform, but leave people with a sense of purpose, without going, oh, this is just fucking horrible. This is just so unjust.
The insanity.
Also recognise the insanity. Like some things were so crazy they were actually felt crazier on paper when I read it. I'm like, I can't believe this was said to me. I can't believe this was said by people of this standing or this pay bracket or this reputation. And it was, in many ways, I had to find the humour. Actually, throughout the whole book, I have to find humour. And it's the same thing with Jan and I on We Used to Be Journos.
I know, I love it. Genuinely.
We have to find a way to laugh.
Yeah. Black comedy sometimes is the only way to get through those dark things.
And so I think it was a way for me to get through that chapter, to highlight the absurdity and to also try and find a way to laugh. Otherwise, I would have just sat at the computer crying the whole time because it was so absurd and so unfair, and I was put through so much hell, and I didn't know how to...
I mean, I think that is stylistically right. It is absurd because, honestly, the documentation is absurd.
Yeah,
so
it really is.
You can't really play it straight, can you?
No. I couldn't play it straight. And so you'll see that I turn particular moments of the court that I found so absurd into music tracks.
Yeah.
And so...
Is there a secret musician dwelling within? You don't do sport, but do you do music?
I don't, but you know what? I'm always open to taking on more things because I have so much spare time.
Oh, you do. You have so much spare time. Gosh, help us all. Through it all, I guess, you know, the last 3 years of wisdom that you've gained, and incredible pain, no doubt. Would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I would do it again even before I had won.
Wow. Okay.
Because there was one point, and I write about it in the book, and any sensible lawyer has to sit their client down and say, are you sure you don't want to settle? Do you really want to go through federal court? We have no idea which way it's going to go, because as we know, it's a legal system. It's not necessarily a justice system. And there are so many markers for why this isn't a justice system. The incarceration of First Nations people, the very low prosecution rates for sexual violence victims. There are so many indicators why this is. And sometimes it's those with the biggest hip pocket, the deepest pockets, that can fight and litigate and drag things out into lawfare. And the only way, a quick shout out, I was able to do this was because of the generosity of the public with crowdfundme, and then my barristers did it pro bono. There's no way I could have fought. We had thought at one point when we were having this conversation that the ABC's legal fees may have been $1 million. They said, if you lose, and they put a costs order in, which means you have to pay most, if not all, of the legal fees. How would you do this? And I talk about how I brainstormed different ways in which I could come up with $1 million. We later found out it was $2.6 million that the ABC spent.
Maybe it was good you didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was $2.6 million. But it was one of those things that was so in the public interest. If we hadn't gone to court, we would never have been able to reveal the emails, the paper trail, the compromise. And this goes back to my journalistic ideals, which is holding the powerful to account and giving a voice to the voiceless. And in this moment, the ABC is such a powerful and important institution. I always try and reiterate how important I think it is as an institution. Like, I think it's worth fighting for, even though I had to fight it. And then if you think about giving a voice to the voiceless, this is happening at a time when more than 260 Palestinian and Lebanese journalists have been killed. So these are my peers. My media peers are being killed at a rate we have never, ever seen before in history. And at a time when there are Palestinian children who are starving. They don't have a voice. So that here I am with this rare, again, I'm going to correct myself. They're not starving. They are being starved. They are deliberately being starved as a policy. And I'm in a situation in which I could do something. How could I back down? How could I live with myself if I back down? Because this moment in history, I have no doubt, is going to be looked back at. And people are going to be mortified. They're going to be mortified by our government's complicity. They're going to be mortified what we saw in plain sight. They're going to be mortified at the rollback of our civic liberties, whether it's the right to use certain words, the right to protest, and at the same time of the creeping authoritarianism in government. Like, we are going to look back and go, how did we let this happen?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, history is repeating itself, and yet we're doing nothing.
Yeah. How did we let this happen? I thought, I have a moment to do something, and I don't think I could live with myself if I didn't take that opportunity. Yeah, and I'm glad I didn't have to do any of the things that I had planned to do. I was like, maybe I'll have to go bankrupt. Maybe I'll have to sell a kidney. Like, all the options. All of the options. Wow. But so yes, I would have done it again, because it goes back to the so many of the women, which I guess it prepared me for that point, because they were like, I knew it could potentially ruin me, but that it was worth it.
Wow. Hence book 3, Women Who Sleep.
Women Who Sleep.
We'll get to that. I mean, actually, that's an important question, both through the work you do as a journalist, human rights activist, and everything you forward. You confront trauma on a daily basis.
Yes.
What kind of self-care practices do you put in place so that you can keep going?
There are so many things I have to do to manage my mental health. I am still on antidepressants from when I had depression and anxiety with my second child. I exercise very regularly. I have to get a lot of sleep. I know I joke about women who sleep, but I do actually go to bed at a decent time and prioritize my sleep. I see a therapist regularly. I spend time in the sun, because melatonin, what it does for your skin. I journal. I have to do all the things. I do all the things.
Fantastic.
Constantly to keep myself afloat. I need to take breaks from my phone and social media. I always charge my phone in another room, so it's not the last thing I see and the first thing. There's a lot of, as you say, trauma that I face daily through my work. But and I talk about a little bit about the intergenerational trauma of my mother's experiences of violence and dispossession when she was a teenager. It's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot, and it's okay to feel the way people feel. I think a lot of people are feeling upset or triggered or worried, whether it's about the climate, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about the genocide. And I guess I'm at a point where I think you would something would have to be wrong with you if you're not feeling a bit worried. I'd be more worried if you're not worried.
If you're not worried, exactly.
But it's
put these care practices in place.
Exactly.
And
these aren't normal times,
Yeah.
and I don't think we should accept that these are normal times. Yeah.
I really appreciate you being honest about that, because actually a lot of people, as you say, look up to you and think, gosh, you're amazing. And you are amazing. And how do you do the things that you do? And hearing that it takes work. You know, there's a lot of work.
And I
there's a village behind the scenes that's there supporting you.
And I stop doing the work sometimes,
Yeah.
and then I drink myself to sleep, and I do all the bad things,
Yeah.
which I know are terrible, and then I have to pull myself out of that. And
because guess what? You're a human being.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Let's celebrate that actually for a moment.
Yeah, exactly. That we all struggle, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, but how did you do it? I would have been so scared." I was like, I was constantly scared.
I was terrified. Yeah.
But I did it anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. And put those support struts in place, I guess, both personally and in that network as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, can I ask you a question?
You may.
Was there a particular woman that you appreciated or were drawn to, or for whatever reason?
I did. I loved Slobodanka.
Oh, she's the best.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Slobodanka.
Yeah. Oh, I have distant relatives who also were refugees who worked at BHP.
Oh, okay.
Male. But, you know, that experience of being an immigrant coming to a new country, you know, your old credentials actually don't count for anything. So you have to start from the ground floor and work your way up. And she was a total baller, right?
Oh, she's so funny and hilarious.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
She's really cool.
Exactly.
I love that.
It's just and her personality. I mean, there's so much about her story. So she. I mean, gosh, it's really, as you say, it is so hard to pick a personal favourite, but she's definitely a standout for me.
Oh, great. So. Amazing.
You talk a lot on your podcast about the difference between journalism and opinion.
Yeah.
And there is journalism best practice, no doubt.
Yeah.
But also rules change.
Yes.
So I'm interested, like, if there's an old school journalism rule you had that you would throw out, but alternately, what's one that you would keep and make law?
Sure. There is this notion, but for those who aren't familiar with what the podcast is, it's a news commentary. So Jan and I, we had trained as straight news journos. We started at SBS. We worked our way up in newsrooms. I was a television news reporter for many, many years. Over the last several years, both of us have moved into either satire, comedy, commentary, opinion pieces, where you're not doing the who, what, why, when of journalism, which is the kind of straight meant to be like journalism. A robot. Yeah. And one of the things I would absolutely not only toss out, I would set it on fire, is this notion that journalists are objective and neutral. We are just a piece of cardboard, and we don't feel anything, and we don't have preconceived notions, and everything we are not. Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody votes. Everybody has views. And this idea of what it means to be an objective journalist and what it means to be an activist journalist, which was something which was just thrown at me a lot, was it's arbitrarily applied, and it's usually applied to people from minoritized communities or people who are challenging the status quo. So if you're Indigenous, or if you're queer, or if you live with a disability, or if you or whatever, it's just like, oh, well, you can't possibly cover that story with objectivity because you're too close to it. I was an activist journalist because my background is Lebanese, and I shared a Human Rights Watch post, which was factual. I can't possibly share something about Israeli human rights atrocity because I'm too close to it and I'm an activist, which is absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. So I see that objectivity being used as a weapon to manage the status quo and to not interrogate power. So I would throw that out. I think something that I would set in stone, but is so important, is to be fair. Yeah. I think that even whoever you are or whatever you are doing, you can still be fair. And that doesn't mean that you have to do a false balance. Like, I'm going to be fair, so I'm going to interview you about climate change, and then I'm going to interview a climate change denier. And that is just fair because we're going to get two perspectives. It's like, no, that is not fair because the weight of evidence and the detrimental impacts to the environment and to humans is well documented. It is lunacy to be like, we're just going to put them on equal weight, and this is just how we balance. And at the moment, there's a lot of false sense of balance. We're just going to, white supremacist, what do you think about this? You don't validate things that are harmful and dangerous and not backed by evidence. And it's something that we're seeing. And part of the reason there's been this rise of independent media in recent years is because we're seeing this fairness thrown out of the window when it comes to interrogating Israel's actions against journalists, against Palestinians, again, increasingly against Lebanese. All of a sudden it's like, well, here's this enormous weight of evidence and we're going to be fair and we're just going to then go to Benjamin Netanyahu, who's going to deny it all.
Yes.
Even though there's video evidence of it. Benjamin Netanyahu says he didn't do it.
And yet, a role running here in the background.
Of everything that you can see and all of the evidence and the pile of dead bodies and the starving children and all the international human rights reports and all of the academic scholars and all the genocide scholars and the Israeli human rights organizations. But we are just going to falsely, and that is
platform
not fair.
A voice. No,
and that is
what
not
about
fair.
the weight of evidence?
And that is not, and that's, I think that's what I would say a lot of my colleagues at the moment aren't being fair.
And it is platforming voice then, because I think a lot of what you and Jan talk about too is that evidence-based journalism, like proper old school journalism. And not only have you had years actually in the media doing the work, but you were also academically trained as a journalist.
Yes.
And you have taught journalism.
Yes, exactly.
So you've looked at it from all sorts of different angles. And
that's why we're looking at our industry and some of the work, and especially our public broadcaster. We're like, no, this is an abandonment of our principles.
Yes, yeah, of everything that real proper news journalism stands for, because in the first instance it's about investigating and getting to and uncovering the truth.
Yes.
It's not about putting forward general notions and ideas and giving certain people a voice or a platform. It's actually going and looking at the record and interrogating the record and interrogating primary artifacts and going to places and seeing it with your own eyes, or having a stringer and having them report back to you what is actually happening on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people do go, oh, yeah, no, but activism's not good and you should be just objective. And it's like, well, at its very heart, when you look at the Walkley Awards, for example, which is our Logies or our Oscars of journalism, when you look at the criteria to get some of the biggest kind of awards, it's like, have you shifted a policy? What has been the public impact? So by its nature, some of the best journalism has resulted in royal commissions or Senate inquiries or toppling of governments or the ousting of a corporate leader. So by its definition, some of the best investigative journalism is activism in that it changes.
Well, that's right. Chris Masters, he's a stalwart, and his journalism has uncovered some incredible stories and press, but he's never been labelled as an activist journalist ever, I don't think.
Yeah.
Ben Roberts-Smith, I mean, he's like the whole story's
been
upturned.
the Nick McKenzie stuff.
Yes,
like it literally
Nick
brings...
and Chris did that together,
Oh, so that's right. Nick and Chris,
yeah.
it brings institutions and powerful to account and to their needs.
But are they activists? No, I think they were just, very thorough investigative journalists.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I would implore people to have a look at... implore people to have a look at who and when that label is applied to.
Yes. We always do end with a little light-hearted quiz.
Okay, let's do it.
Just to kind of get some air back in the room and have some fun. It's incredibly quick. It's incredibly short. You just have to choose between one or the other of these 10 options.
Okay.
All right, ready? Going out or staying in?
Going out.
Flowers or chocolates?
Flowers.
Hip-hop or opera?
Hip-hop.
Obviously, we all know the answer to that one. The country or the city?
The country.
Twisties or Doritos?
Oh, this is hard. Both? I have to choose one. I'd eat both of them.
I mean, look, I'm not going to stand in the way of a woman and her Twisties and Doritos, believe me.
Yeah.
This might be equally hard then. Wine or whiskey?
Wine.
Rugby league or AFL?
Rugby league.
Reading or the movies?
Reading every day.
Laughing or crying?
Laughing.
Yeah.
Laughing through the tears.
Yes.
Yeah, laughing through the hard parts.
Antoinette, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story with us.
Oh, I've loved it. Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing. You've taught me things I thought I already knew, but only this much, and now I know this much more.
Amazing.
So thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you to our listeners also for joining us today. If there is any book that really exemplifies what this podcast stands for, it is Antoinette's book. If you're ever in need of a boost or to get through any tough times, you should first read. Women Who Win is published by Penguin Random House and is available where all good books are sold.